So what's going on with Duncan v. Becerra? I've heard your questions, so let's talk about this. But real quick before we jump into this video, if you think that California's ban on large capacity magazines violates the Second Amendment, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe. Also, I want to give a big shout out to one of the sponsors of the channel, and that is Got Your Six. For just $2.99 a month, you get access to a slew of amazing things on their app. This includes up-to-date information on local, state, and national legislation, as well as you have the ability to create small groups on their app. They also have this cool button on their app called Initiate Freedom, and if your Second Amendment rights were ever violated through something like a red flag law, you could click this button and it sends out what is essentially an Amber Alert for firearms owners to individuals in your small group. And it lets them know what is going on with you. They can set up GoFundMe accounts. They can let others know. So if you'd be interested in joining their app, I'll put a link down to Got Your Six in the comment section and the details section. So what is going on with Duncan v. Becerra? This is a question I've been getting asked a lot, especially after I put out my last video. I've been getting a lot of comments about this, and I've been receiving a ton of Instagram DMs about what's the status of Duncan v. Becerra? Why haven't we heard anything yet from the court? If you watched my last video, I essentially covered how the Ninth Circuit and the three-judge panel in Duncan v. Becerra sought a response from our side, and our side filed that response with the three-judge panel September 18th, 2020. And the way that the language in the Ninth Circuit reads essentially is that 14 days after that, the Ninth Circuit had to make some decision one way or another. And it's not necessarily from the filing, the 918. What I talked about is that there is a potential language where it talks about circulation. It's 14 days from the circulation. And in that video, I talked about there might be some days, give or take, because not necessarily because it's filed that day does that clock start to run. Circulation could have happened after the fact, but I was just giving the date based on September 18th, 2020. If you were to count 14 days from there, that would lead us to October 2nd. But as many of you are familiar, and from all those people sending me DMs and comments, we are well beyond October 2nd now. So what is going on with Duncan v. Becerra? Why has the Ninth Circuit not yet made a decision? Why haven't we heard anything yet? And really for myself, what I was looking for as far as a potential deadline was earlier this month. But of course, like you guys are familiar, that's completely run. And so now we're kind of in this weird limbo phase. And just as like you, I'm a little perplexed by what's exactly going on. And so I decided to do a little bit more deep dive into some procedural aspects of the Ninth Circuit and look at some secondary sources to try to get a better idea of what potentially might be happening. Now, I want to make very clear, I'm not saying this is exactly what's going on right now in this case. I think your guess is as good as mine. All I can do is kind of speculate and kind of how I'm thinking about this right now. But as far as a firm date about when the Ninth Circuit is going to take some sort of action on this or what particularly is going on in this case, I think we're in a big gray area right now. And I'll try to clarify that as I kind of discuss some of the things that I've been thinking about and looking at, and specifically trying to analogize this case to some other things that we've seen make its way through the Ninth Circuit. So one of the first things that I looked at was a bunch of secondary sources talking about the procedural aspects of the Ninth Circuit. And one thing that was very clear through looking at a lot of secondary sources relating to the process of the Ninth Circuit is that even Ninth Circuit judges themselves aren't very familiar with how exactly the Ninth Circuit procedural aspects operate. And a lot of them are actually very confused, like us, about how this all works because it is very messy. But also looking at these secondary sources, another interesting thing that I uncovered was talking about when a response is requested by a three-judge panel when an en banc petition is sought. All the secondary sources that I saw pretty much said that if a three-judge panel is seeking a response from the other side, like our side, the Ninth Circuit here, the three-judge panel sought a response from our side. Usually what that signals is that there is some dispute between the judges, like we knew there was, even in the three-judge panel, there was a dispute. But usually what that signals is that at least one judge is going to want to take this en banc. And that is why the three-judge panel is seeking a response from the other side, is because they are anticipating, or it has been signaled to the three-judge panel, that someone is going to make an en banc call or a vote for en banc. So the reason why I mentioned that is because that is what has happened in this case. Almost immediately, the three-judge panel requested a response from our side, and that is the last thing we can see filed on the Mitchell & Associates site. So in reading these secondary sources, what that signals to me and what's gone on in this case is that this is likely going to get an en banc vote if it has not already. And the reason why I say if it has not already is because another thing that's been made clear after reading some of these secondary sources is that a lot of these procedures that we've talked about, or I've talked about in the videos past, like calling for a 5.4B motion essentially to the three-judge panel, Those type of things are pretty much behind the scenes. We won't see them pop up on the actual docket. So there could be things going on right now that we are not fully aware of. And when I read that in the secondary sources, I decided to look at other cases that we've seen make its way through the Ninth Circuit and actually be sought for an en banc hearing. And two specific Second Amendment cases that I'm aware of that have kind of been either petitioned for a rehearing en banc or have actually had a petition for rehearing en banc and had one granted is Young v. Hawaii, and also I looked at the Peruta case. So for example, let's take Young v. Hawaii first. If you look at that entry on the Missional Associates site, what you can see is that there was a petition for a rehearing en banc, and then soon after that, the court had an order requesting a response to the petition rehearing en banc. Sounds very familiar to what we had in Duncan v. Becerra, correct? And then there are various amicus briefs filed, but then you had the actual filing of the response, and then you also had a reply. So one thing I want to stop here and also discuss is that there's probably also going to be a reply from the AG side that we will see pop up in Duncan v. Becerra. But we haven't had that yet. So I would keep an eye out for a reply to hit the information here pretty soon. But then if you go through some of the additional filings in Young v. Hawaii, by the time that the court issues what is actually the order to schedule the en banc oral arguments, there was no indication before that there had been an en banc vote, even a 5.4b motion, anything like that, or an order by the three-judge panel denying hearing this case through the three-judge panel and then essentially kicking it to a larger vote. There is nothing in the docket that indicates those things. So in the prior videos when I was talking about the 5.4b motions and the timelines running and the Ninth Circuit needing to take a vote, it seems like all that stuff and all the memos that get sent happen behind the scenes and they don't actually hit the filings. It's essentially the Ninth Circuit, they go through their process themselves, and it almost appears like we won't know whether there's actually been an en banc take-up, either until there is an order granting the en banc and setting the date for the oral arguments for the en banc hearing, or until there's an order denying a full en banc hearing, and then essentially a mandate from the three-judge panel. And so where I'm gathering that from is the Peruta case. So if you look at the Peruta case entries on Mitchell and Associates, we see that there was a petition for a rehearing en banc after that decision. And then the court orders a response to that petition, very similar to what we saw in Duncan, very similar to what we just talked about in Young. Very similar processes. There's a petition, then a request for response, and then there is a reply. And then in Peruta, there is no other entries from the court until the court actually issues their order denying the full court en banc rehearing. And then there is a court order, which is the mandate from the three-judge panel essentially saying, hey, lower court, this is what we've decided, this is over, it's not going to go en banc. But it's very interesting as far as the votes, all that stuff, we don't really see any of that happen or play out. So I think really what's going on right now is that there has been something that has happened behind the scenes that we are not aware of. It's very likely that there are some other procedural things happening behind the scenes, like an actual vote or a sua sponte call for an en banc hearing, and we won't know about that until the court actually either denies or orders the actual oral arguments for a full en banc. Now, once again, I want to reiterate, I'm not saying that's absolutely what's going on here, that it's absolutely certain that the Ninth Circuit is going to take this full en banc. I'm just speculating, and I think, like I mentioned earlier, your guess is as good as mine. All I can give you is what I've looked at in the secondary source, being confused about the procedures and the timelines about what's actually supposed to be happening right now. So all of that information to answer the questions from everybody saying, what's going on with Duncan? Hasn't Duncan's time run up? Shouldn't we be allowed right now to go out and purchase magazines? Like I mentioned in all my other videos, and like you're probably very familiar with here in the state of California, this is a long process. Nothing is fast. I know we all get excited and really just want things to be done right away, but the reality is there's a lot of loopholes here and there that the court can use or the parties can use to extend these things out, drag them out, and also there's a lot of things that happen behind the scenes that we just are not privy to. But the one thing I want to make clear out of all this, as far as if the court has denied an en banc hearing, because I know a lot of people were speculating because we haven't heard anything yet, they must have had deny the en banc hearing. If the court is going to deny the en banc hearing, we will for sure see that hit the docket. That is something that will absolutely hit the docket. And then soon after that, you will have a mandate order from the three-judge panel. So until we actually see an entry of a denial of the full hearing by the 3-judge panel and an actual mandate by the 3-judge panel, Duncan v. Becerra is very much alive in my eyes and should be in your mind very much alive. Until we have those 2 entries hit the docket in this case, we are not out of the woods yet. Don't just assume that this case has died out or the timelines have died out. Like I mentioned, there's a lot of stuff that can happen behind the scenes, but this case is truly not dead until we have those 2 specific entries. So I just wanted to make you guys aware of that because I know a lot of people were speculating that this case is dead. And in my opinion, this case is definitely not dead yet. It seems to be very much alive. And in my opinion, I think there is something going on behind the scenes where maybe an en banc call has happened, but we are just not privy to that yet. And so hopefully that helps shed some light about how at least I'm thinking about this and what my opinion is on why Duncan v. Becerra is kind of in the status that it is right now. So if you have any questions, go ahead and comment down below and I'll try to answer the best of my ability. Also, if you like this video and like support the channel, one of the best ways to do that is join the Patreon page, and I'll put a link down below to my Patreon page. Also, just like, comment, subscribing, and make sure you hit that notification bell because that helps the channel analytics, helps us spread the word about the Second Amendment, and also helps spread the word about all the various violations that are going on here in the state. So as always, thanks guys for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and never forget this nation was built by armed scholars, and this nation will be maintained by armed scholars.